The chandelier above shimmered like falling stars, casting golden light across the grand ballroom of the Sapphire Elite Hotel. The event was invitationally attended by CEOs, diplomats and socialites, and at the center of it all stood Rami, the charming, sharp-suited entrepreneur who always knew how to command attention. Flanked by a group of eager associates and longtime friends, Ramiz raised his champagne glass with a smug grin. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "I think I've finally found the one. Kinza is not just beautiful, she's brilliant. A real catch, if I do say so myself." Laughter rippled through the circle. Cameras flashed nearby as Kinza, dazzling in a sequined emerald dress, posed like she belonged in a Vogue spread, with her sleek hair, curated Instagram presence, and an eye for social climbing. She was exactly what Ramiz thought success looked like. One of his friends chuckled. "Well, she's definitely an upgrade from ... What was her name?" Maya. Ramiz smirked, not missing a beat. Maya was too plain, a small-town soul trying to fit in a city of stars. She didn't know how to dress, couldn't network, and God forbid she actually believed in love over power. He shrugged dramatically. "She never really understood me." More laughter followed. Ramiz basked in it, convinced he'd won not just in business, but in life. But just as the music swelled and a waiter offered more drinks, the grand entrance doors creaked open. A hush fell. Outside, a deep navy Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up. The chauffeur stepped out and opened the door with practiced elegance. Heels clicked against the marble floor. Maya stepped inside. She was unrecognizably elegant, radiant, and composed in a crimson satin gown that hugged her frame like royalty. Her hair was swept into a graceful chignon, her makeup flawless. But it was her aura, confident and serene, that froze the room. On her arm was none other than Zaryab Kontha, elusive, powerful billionaire known for his philanthropy, tech empire, and aversion to public appearances. Whispers filled the air like wind before a storm. Ramiz blinked. His smirk vanished. The plain woman he had discarded had just walked in, as the most unforgettable woman in the room, and everyone noticed. Before the diamonds and chandeliers, before the whispers of wealth and envy, Maya's world was filled with chalk dust and the laughter of children. She lived in a modest neighborhood on the edge of the city, where plants lined balconies and neighbors still greeted each other by name. Maya worked as a primary school teacher at a local government school. Her classroom was small, the walls decorated with hand-painted alphabets and student drawings. She didn't have much, but what she had she cherished. Kindness came naturally to her. She brought extra lunch for the underfed children, stayed late for those who struggled, and often used her own salary to buy books for her class. People called her warm, grounded, and full of integrity. But in a world that often valued sparkle over soul, Maya's simplicity was overlooked. Then came Ramiz. He had arrived at the school to sponsor an event. Young, wealthy, and disarmingly charming. With his tailored suits and expensive watch, he looked like a man out of a movie. But it wasn't just his money that drew Maya in. It was how he initially listened, how he seemed to admire her sincerity. He watched her interact with the children, praised her values, and said things like, "You're the kind of woman this world needs more of." Maya, never one to fall quickly, found herself swept into a whirlwind romance. He brought her flowers every week, took her to restaurants she had never dreamed of visiting, and whispered promises of forever. Within 6 months, they were married. But forever came with conditions. Almost immediately, cracks began to show. Ramiz's compliments turned into critiques. "Why do you dress like a teacher all the time? You're my wife now, act like it." He hated her friends, questioned her phone calls, and insisted she quit her job. "You don't need to work anymore. Just focus on me," he said. Slowly, she was pulled away from her world. Her wardrobe changed, her social circle vanished, and her laughter dimmed. Ramiz became cold, distant. He'd return home late, drunk with cologne that wasn't hers. When she questioned him, he'd twist her words, make her feel foolish. "You're imagining things. Don't be so dramatic. You're lucky I chose you." The gaslighting was subtle, but it chipped away at her confidence. Piece by piece, he would shower her with expensive gifts after explosive fight, diamond earrings to apologize for public insults, a luxury watch after he cancelled her birthday plans. To the world, they looked like a perfect power couple. Behind closed doors, Maya cried in silence. Infidelity soon followed. She found lipstick stains on his shirts, cryptic messages on his phone, and perfume scents that didn't belong. When she confronted him, he smirked. "Men like me don't stay with women like you forever. Be grateful you still have my name." That night, she sat on the cold bathroom floor, heartbroken but not defeated. She realized then that she had become a ghost in her own life. The next morning, she packed a single suitcase, took her wedding ring off, and walked out. No fights, no final words, just silence. She had no money, no property, and no job, but she had something far more valuable: her dignity. She moved into a friend's spare room and started over. The media whispered rumors, but Maya didn't respond. Ramiz told the world she had left him because she couldn't handle the pressure of his world. He painted her as weak, emotionally unstable, and ungrateful, but Maya stayed quiet, not out of fear, but out of grace. She believed time would reveal the truth. She found a temporary teaching job, took night classes, and slowly began to rebuild her spirit. The world didn't applaud her courage. There were no headlines for her healing, but within the quiet, she grew. She didn't know it then, but life was preparing her for something far greater than the pain she had endured. She would rise not just to survive, but to shine. Ramiz didn't waste time mourning the end of his marriage. In his eyes, Maya was a chapter closed, an old book shelved away without a second glance. Within weeks he was spotted at high-end lounges and art auctions, always with a different woman on his arm, until he met Kinza. She wasn't like the others. Kinza was striking, tall, poised, with piercing eyes and a voice that could charm or cut, depending on the moment. She had once worked as an event planner for the elite, coordinating luxury galas, political fundraisers, and fashion launches. She knew how to read a room, and more importantly, how to control it. The moment they met at a rooftop charity dinner, she made her move. "You're Ramiz Malik, aren't you? You left quite the impression on the business world and on headlines," she said with a playful smirk. It wasn't flirtation, it was strategy. Ramiz was intrigued. Their relationship escalated quickly. Kinza made him feel seen again, adored, powerful. But unlike Maya, she didn't ask for love, she asked for influence. She introduced him to investors he couldn't previously access, leveraged her social connections to get him on panels, red carpets, and magazine covers. In public, she was his arm candy. In private, she was his advisor, strategist, and behind-the-scenes puppeteer. Together, they became the couple everyone whispered about. The media painted them as unstoppable, a modern-day power duo. Invitations to elite gatherings poured in. His business flourished, thanks to Kinza's networking skills and manipulation of the upper crust. But the more Ramiz rose in status, the more he let Kinza take control. Kinza, for all her glamour, was ruthless. She had studied Maya from the shadows, her past, her style, her quiet strength, and hated it. "She made you look weak," she once told Ramiz coldly. "A man of your caliber married a nobody. Do you know what that did to your image?" Slowly, she pushed him to erase all traces of Maya from his life. She forced him to remove Maya's name from all legal documents, delete old photos, sell the house they once shared, and even discouraged mutual friends from mentioning her. "She's history," Kinza said, "and history doesn't belong in your future." At first Ramiz resisted. There were moments of perfume scent, an old song that stirred something in him. But Kinza was relentless. She reminded him that image was everything, and she was right. His world now ran on optics, not emotions. Behind closed doors, their relationship was transactional. Kinza withheld affection, controlled his schedule, monitored his interactions. When he questioned her, she reminded him of what he owed her. "I made you relevant again," she hissed during one of their private arguments. "Without me, you're just another man who peaked too early." Ramiz didn't love her, at least not the way he once loved Maya, but he told himself that love was a luxury. Kinza brought power, access, and respect, and that was enough, or so he believed. What he didn't realize was that in scrubbing Maya from his past, he was slowly erasing the last remnants of his own humanity. Every decision Kinza made for him pulled him deeper into a world of mirrors and masks, until even he couldn't remember who he used to be. And while Kinza smiled beside him in photographs, draped in designer gowns, she knew exactly what she was doing, climbing to the top, one betrayal at a time. The days after Maya left, Ramiz were not filled with immediate strength or confidence. They were heavy with doubt, silence, and a kind of grief she didn't know how to name. She had escaped a prison, yes, but freedom came with loneliness, with unpaid bills and sleepless nights. She moved into a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, sharing space with Aisha, a fellow teacher, an old college friend who offered her more than just a roof. She offered warmth. They drank chai on the balcony most evenings, talking little but understanding much. Maya found part-time work at a local tuition center and later started tutoring children in her home. The money was barely enough, but she managed. What she couldn't manage alone, she took to therapy, a gift she hadn't known she needed. Her therapist, a gentlewoman named Mrs. Aslam, helped her unpack the emotional wounds that Ramiz had inflicted, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the systematic erasure of her identity. Your silence wasn't weakness, Mrs. Aslam said. Once it was survival, and slowly Maya began to reclaim herself. She started dressing for comfort against soft cotton curtains and sandals. She cooked her own meals, laughed freely with children, and went back to reading novels late into the night. The world that had once felt so sharp and unforgiving now had corners of softness again. Then one ordinary Saturday afternoon, everything changed. Maya was browsing through a street-side bookstore when she heard a scream, a child's shriek followed by the screech of tires. In a flash, she turned to see a small boy running toward the road, a car approaching too fast to stop. Without thinking, Maya sprinted forward, grabbed the child by his shoulders, and rolled with him onto the sidewalk, just inches from disaster. The car honked wildly before driving off. Bystanders rushed over. The boy, though shaken, was unharmed. Maya sat on the pavement, heart pounding, holding him close. "Are you okay?" she asked, brushing his hair out of his face. A tall man came rushing toward them, security guards flanking him. He dropped to his knees beside the boy. "Rayon," he exclaimed, pulling the child into his arms. Then he looked at Maya. Their eyes met. Zaryab Khan was known in headlines as a reclusive billionaire, a tech visionary, and a powerful philanthropist. But in that moment, he was just a father, terrified and grateful. "You saved my son," he said softly. "It happened so fast," Maya replied, breathless. "He's safe. That's all that matters." Later that evening, a car arrived at Maya's home. It wasn't there to deliver thanks, it was an invitation. Zaryab wanted to meet her again, properly. They met at a quiet lounge inside his corporate tower, not in the glare of media or society. He listened more than he spoke, intrigued not just by her bravery, but by the humility with which she carried it. She didn't ask for favors, didn't boast about saving his child. "You said you're a teacher," he asked. "I was," she replied. "I'm figuring things out now." He paused. "I run a foundation for education and women's empowerment. We're expanding. I could use someone like you." Maya was stunned. "I don't have a polished resume or degrees from foreign universities." He smiled gently. "I'm not looking for polish. I'm looking for purpose. And you have it." It wasn't charity. It was recognition. Maya hesitated, then accepted. Working at the Zaryab Foundation brought a new rhythm to her life. She met women who had survived worse than she had: abuse, abandonment, war, and still rose with fire in their eyes. She organized literacy workshops, built community programs, and found meaning in being part of something larger than her past. Zaryab was often away running board meetings in Dubai, funding orphanages in Turkey, but whenever he returned, he sought Maya out. Their conversations were never rushed. They spoke of values, loss, healing, and hope. He told her about losing his wife years ago to illness, and the guilt he carried over not spending enough time with her. Maya shared nothing about Ramiz, not yet, but in Zaryab's presence she felt something He never interrupted her thoughts, never corrected her beliefs. Where Ramiz had once made her feel small, Zaryab made her feel seen. They started having lunch together, nothing fancy, sometimes just dal and roti from the staff kitchen. But with every passing day, the space between them narrowed. It was not a love story born of grand gestures. It was quiet, unspoken trust. Maya was not yet ready to fall again. But this time, if she did, it would be on her terms. The woman who once walked out of her marriage with nothing but self-respect, now walked into rooms with purpose, confidence, and grace. Maya's transformation was not overnight. It had been built brick by brick, through hard work, healing, and an awakening sense of her own worth. Under the umbrella of the Zaryab Foundation, Maya rose quietly but steadily. At first, she stayed behind the scenes, planning programs, writing policy drafts, listening to survivors of abuse. But Zaryab, always watchful and perceptive, saw her growing light and knew it was time the world did too. He invited her to speak at a women's empowerment summit in Istanbul, a modest platform, yet an important one. Maya hesitated, anxious about the spotlight, but standing behind the podium, looking out at a room full of women who had weathered storms, something inside her clicked into place. She shared her journey not with tears or rage, but with clarity and courage. "I am not defined by the man who left me," she said. "I am defined by the woman I became after he did." The applause that followed wasn't just for the speech, it was for the strength that radiated from her being. That summit became the spark. More invitations followed: Paris, Dubai, Nairobi. Maya found herself traveling across continents, speaking on panels with diplomats and activists. Her fashion evolved naturally, flowing silhouettes, timeless saris, and tailored suits that matched her poise. She wasn't trying to prove anything, she had simply found herself. What made her truly captivating, though, wasn't her style or fame, it was her authenticity. She never painted herself as a victim, never dropped names or shared personal scandals. She focused on systemic change, on education, on giving women tools to walk away from chains. Emotional or economic. Zaryab watched her flourish with quiet pride. He never claimed credit, never imposed himself. Instead, he supported from the wings, offering guidance when asked, space when needed. Their bond grew deeper, still undefined but unmistakably intimate. There were rumors, yes, but neither of them responded. They didn't need to. And then came the media storm. A photo of Maya and Zaryab at a London gala went viral. Maya stood beside him, wearing a sleek black gown, her hand lightly touching his arm as they smiled at foreign dignitaries. The headline read, "Zaryab Khan's mystery woman, who is she?" Speculation followed. Blogs dissected her every appearance. Was she a political advisor, a philanthropist, a romantic interest? But no one connected her to Ramiz Malek, not yet. Maya's name had never been tied to scandal. After the divorce, she had faded into anonymity by design. Now she had returned not as someone's ex-wife, but as a force in her own right. Still, whispers circled back to Ramiz's world, as colleagues sent him the photo with raised eyebrows. "Khan's woman looks familiar, doesn't she?" He dismissed it at first, but the seed was planted. Meanwhile, Maya continued to rise. Zaryab appointed her the head of the Foundation's International Women's Initiative. Her face appeared on magazine covers next to taglines like powerful, poised, purpose-driven. She met world leaders, attended UN forums, and hosted roundtables with survivors of domestic abuse. In every interview, she steered the focus toward others. "This isn't about me," she'd say. "It's about every woman who was told she wasn't enough and chose to rise anyway." Still, beneath all the public success, Maya remained grounded. She made time for chai with Aisha, still kept a journal, still returned missed calls from former students. The applause didn't define her, her peace did. One evening, as she stood in front of a mirror in a Milan hotel, preparing for another charity gala, she looked at her reflection not with vanity, but with pride. She didn't just survive her past, she transcended it. And though the world didn't yet know the full story, they soon would, because fate was already arranging the moment when Maya's new life would collide head-on with the one she left behind. And the man who thought he had erased her. The grand ballroom of the Serafina Towers glowed under 1,000 lights. Velvet drapes, crystal chandeliers, and imported white orchids lined the space. Waiters in crisp uniforms floated through the crowd with glasses of vintage champagne. A soft jazz quartet played near the fountain, and the scent of exclusivity hung in the air like expensive cologne. This was Ramiz's night. The tech mogul turned social icon was finally unveiling his latest luxury gadget, an AI-powered lifestyle assistant, sleek enough to wear like jewelry and, more importantly, announcing his engagement to Kinza. Ramiz adjusted his cufflinks as he scanned the crowd. The guest list was a curated masterpiece. Foreign investors, fashion influencers, business moguls, and several media personalities. All of them were here to celebrate him, to witness how far he'd come, to admire the beautiful, cunning Kinza. By his side, she stood like a statue of triumph in a deep emerald gown, every inch of her calculated to impress. Her laughter rang like bells as she mingled, her arm occasionally grazing Ramiz's. Together, they were meant to be unforgettable. "This is how you reclaim your story," Kinza had whispered to him earlier that evening. "Tonight, you're not just successful, you're untouchable." And he believed her. As the evening progressed, Ramiz sipped his drink with confidence, nodding to admirers, accepting congratulations with a polished smile. His PR team hovered discreetly, ensuring every angle was flattering, every interaction captured. Then came the moment he had waited for all night. He walked toward the stage to make the official toast. The lights dimmed, the crowd gathered, the cameras turned toward him. Kinza slipped her arm through his as they approached the microphone together. Just before he could speak, someone near the back gasped audibly, "Wait, isn't that my—" The words weren't shouted, but they carried slicing through the music, the chatter, the polished silence of wealth. Heads turned, time slowed. At the far end of the ballroom, near the entrance, stood a woman in a floor-length ivory gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her posture was regal, her expression unreadable. Her hair fell in soft waves over one shoulder, and she carried herself with a kind of ease that couldn't be bought, only earned. On her arm was Zaryab Khan, the billionaire, the ghost of every boardroom Ramiz had tried to enter, the man everyone admired from afar, rarely seen in public, now walking straight toward the crowd with Maya by his side. Gasps turned into whispers. Maya, is that her? No way, that's his ex-wife. She's with Zaryab Khan. Ramiz's throat dried. The champagne glass in his hand trembled ever so slightly. He blinked once, then again, as if reality would shift with a second look. It didn't. Kinza's smile faltered. Her grip on his arm tightened. She looked from Maya to Zaryab and back, suddenly aware that something irreversible had just shifted. Maya didn't flinch under the gazes. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She simply nodded politely at a server who welcomed them, and together, she and Zaryab walked into the spotlight like it belonged to them, because tonight it did. Ramiz tried to recover, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice strained. "Thank you for joining us for," but no one was listening anymore. The night he thought would define his legacy had just become the beginning of his unraveling. And it all started with the woman he thought he had erased. The lights outside Serafina Towers blazed brighter than the stars above. A stretch of deep crimson carpet extended from the valet to the main entrance, flanked by golden barriers where paparazzi had gathered like a pack of wolves, their cameras ready, their flashes rapid fire, but nothing they had captured that evening. Of the couture, none of the VIPs could compare to the moment the Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up. It was silent, regal and deliberate. The valet hurried to the door, and the crowd leaned forward instinctively, sensing something or someone different. When Maya stepped out, the world held its breath. She wore an icy silver gown, backless, with subtle embroidery, that caught the light like stars on water. A delicate diamond pendant rested at her collarbone, and her soft waves cascaded effortlessly over one shoulder. She wasn't overdressed. She wasn't trying. She simply was untouchable, elegant, radiant. On her arm was Zaryab Khan. Dressed in a tailored midnight black tuxedo, Zaryab exuded effortless command. He didn't smile for cameras. He didn't pose, yet his presence drew attention like gravity itself. Reporters jolted upright. Zaryab Khan. Who's the woman with him? Oh my God, is that Maya, isn't she? Wasn't she married too? The flashes erupted like fireworks. Zaryab, unfazed by the chaos, offered Maya his arm. "Ready?" he asked with a rare softness in his voice. Maya nodded, her eyes calm, her posture tall. They walked side by side down the red carpet, not rushing, not hiding. The media roared. Microphones were shoved forward. Questions rang out. "Mr. Khan, is this your date? Ma'am, can we have a name please? Is it true, you're heading the UN initiative together?" Zaryab paused. He looked directly into one of the cameras and, with a cool but clear voice, said, "This is Maya, the woman who changed my life." The crowd exploded. Flashbulbs lit up like lightning. Whispers turned to headlines before they even made it through the doors. Inside, the ballroom buzzed like a shaken hive. Kinza stood frozen near the champagne tower, one manicured hand clutching her clutch so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her lips parted slightly as she saw Maya's face glowing on the large entrance screens. Her worst nightmare had walked in dressed in grace, not vengeance. Ramiz, on the other hand, was spiraling. He had pulled one of his PR managers aside moments before. "Get those photographers away from the entrance," he hissed. "They'll ruin everything." The manager hesitated. "Sir, it's Zaryab Khan. He's making headlines right now and—" "That woman, I know who she is," Rami snapped, eyes narrowing. Just handle it." But there was no stopping what was already in motion. Maya and Zaryab entered the ballroom slowly, heads turning in waves. The elite, the wealthy, the powerful, all of them paused to take in the sight. Zaryab was used to this level of awe, but tonight, the awe was for Maya. She nodded at a few familiar faces, offered small smiles, and held her composure like royalty. She didn't gloat. She didn't seek out Ramiz or Kinza. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to unearth every lie Ramiz had ever told. A well-known fashion editor leaned toward her date. "That's the ex-wife he used to mock," she whispered. "He called her forgettable." The man chuckled. "No one's forgetting that woman tonight." Kinza recovered just enough to paste a stiff smile on her face and whisper to Ramiz, "Say something. Don't just stand here like a statue." But Ramiz's mind was miles away. He thought of the last time he saw Maya, quiet, tear-streaked, walking out of their home with a suitcase. No makeup, no luxury, just hurt in her eyes and dignity in her spine. Now she stood across the room, encased in confidence, adored by the very man Ramiz had spent years trying to emulate. The same circles that once ignored her were now leaning in to hear her speak. Ramiz's toast never happened, because no one cared anymore. All eyes had shifted, conversations redirected, the narrative had changed in real time. And Maya, she simply stood beside Zaryab, unshaken, her past no longer a burden but a badge of survival. She had become the story. The music in the ballroom had shifted, but Kinza wasn't dancing. She stood near the edge of the stage, watching Maya glide effortlessly between conversations, journalists hanging on her every word, and Zaryab never straying more than a few feet away. It was a picture Kinza couldn't unsee, wouldn't forget. Her lips were tight, her hands trembled. She turned sharply toward Ramiz, grabbing his arm with a force that startled him. "You told me she was nothing," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You said she was average, disposable, a shadow." Ramiz looked around, nervous. "Lower your voice," he muttered, adjusting his collar. "This isn't the place." "No," she snapped. "This is exactly the place. The same place where she just walked in and destroyed everything." Guests nearby began to glance sideways, sensing tension. Kinza's face contorted with fury. "You knew she was with Zaryab, didn't you? That's why you were so desperate to throw this circus so you could look like the winner." Ramiz stiffened. "You're overreacting." "Oh, am I?" She laughed bitterly. "You dragged me into this image game, paraded me like your trophy, made me help you bury her, and now she's the one shining under the spotlight. I built this event. I rebuilt you, and you're still haunted by a woman you threw away like garbage." People were openly watching now. Phones were coming out. Someone whispered, "Is that Kinza arguing with Ramiz?" The sponsors' table had gone quiet. One of the major investors, a clean-cut man in a navy suit, shook his head and muttered to his assistant, "Pull the funding. This is a PR disaster." Ramiz felt the heat of the collapse creeping up his neck. Kinza's voice rose one last time. "I'm done playing the perfect fiancée while your past eats you alive." With that, she yanked the ring off her finger and tossed it onto the tablecloth with a clink that echoed louder than any microphone. Gasps rippled through the room. Then Kinza turned on her heels, head high, eyes wild, and walked out of the ballroom, without a backward glance, leaving behind the man who had traded authenticity for ambition, and now stood in a room full of people watching him. Unraveled that the ballroom had emptied out like a sinking ship. Staff bustled to pack up cameras and leftover canapes while whispers lingered like smoke in the aftermath of Kinza's very public departure. But Ramiz couldn't hear any of it, not the clatter of silver trays, not the murmurs of sponsors abandoning ship, not even the headlines already buzzing online. All he could hear was the echo of his failure. He stood near the back exit, away from the photographers, scanning the space for one last glimpse of Maya. She hadn't left yet, he'd made sure of that. He needed to talk to her, needed to explain, or at least try. Finally, he saw her standing near a quiet corridor talking to Zaryab and to representatives from the UN Women's Fund. Her laughter was soft, melodic, free. Ramiz approached, nerves shaking his usually confident stride. "Maya," he said, stopping a few feet away. She turned slowly. Her expression didn't shift in her anger, no pity, just composed silence. "We talk?" he asked, motioning toward a quieter corner. Zaryab's eyes narrowed slightly, protective, but Maya raised her hand gently. "It's okay." They stepped away from the others. Ramiz exhaled hard, eyes scanning her face. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know you could become this. I mean, I always knew you were kind, but this, powerful, untouchable. I guess I was too blind to see it." Maya listened, saying nothing. "I was stupid," he continued. "I got caught up in the image, in the success. I thought Kinza was what I wanted, but she just ... mirrored my worst sides. You were the best part of my life, and I threw you away." Maya tilted her head slightly. "You didn't throw me away, Ramiz," she said, voice calm and steady. "You gave me pain." He flinched. She stepped closer, her presence poised yet gentle. "But pain was only the beginning. Zaryab didn't rescue me, he saw me. He gave me space to grow, to heal, to believe again. He gave me purpose." Ramiz opened his mouth, but no words came. "You once mocked me for being too simple," she continued. "Turns out, simplicity was never the problem. Your arrogance was." She looked him in the eyes one final time. "Goodbye, Ramiz." With that, Maya turned and walked back towards Zaryab, who greeted her with a warm nod. Ramiz stood frozen. The applause, the money, the trophies, the events, none of it mattered now. The one person who once loved him without condition had moved on, with grace, with power, without him, and that was his reckoning. The grand ballroom of the Serena Foundation glowed with soft golden light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, orchestral music drifted in the air, and the guests, diplomats, artists, human rights advocates, moved gracefully through the space. But all eyes were on the woman at the center of it all. Maya Dot, clad in an ivory silk gown with delicate embroidery along the neckline. She stood on stage behind a glass podium, her voice steady, her presence radiant. "Betrayal," she began, her gaze scanning the room, "is not the end of your story, it's the moment you start writing a better one." There was a hush, no clinking of glasses, no rustling. "I was once told I was too simple, not glamorous enough, not ambitious enough. I believed it. I shrank to fit a mold someone else had shaped for me. But healing taught me that being gentle is not a weakness, being loyal is not a flaw, and being underestimated is a gift." Polite applause grew into admiration. "In a world that often rewards cruelty disguised as charisma," she said with quiet power, "I found strength in grace, and I found love not in the spotlight, but in the silence between kind words." In the crowd, Zariab stood with his arms folded proudly, a small smile on his face. Next to him, international leaders nodded in approval. A new initiative for women's shelters was being launched tonight, fully funded by the Zariab Foundation, named after Maya's vision. The Rise Project, but not far from the crowd. Half hidden behind a decorative pillar stood Ramiz, uninvited, unnoticed. His suit was crumpled, his face hollow. He had slipped in quietly, desperate to see her again, even if only from a distance. The man who once laughed at Maya's simplicity now watched her command a room filled with the world's most powerful with elegance and conviction. He didn't belong here anymore. He knew it. Maya stepped off the stage, joining Zariab at the center of the ballroom as the music swelled. Cameras flashed as the two began to dance a slow, graceful rhythm only shared by those who have survived storms together. Zariab leaned down and kissed Maya's hand gently. Her smile was soft, at peace. From the sidelines, Ramiz turned and walked away. No applause, no sympathy, only the echo of what he lost ringing in his ears. The screen fades to black. The world once called her ordinary, but a real man saw her worth, and in that moment she became unforgettable.